It's not a secret that Mount Everest is the highest and scariest peak in the entire world. While some people have succeeded in getting to the top, there were at least thousands of expert mountaineers who have tragically failed and fell to their deaths. This is the tragic story of Peter Boardman and Joe Tasker. The three pinnacles are a formation of steep rocks along the northeast ridge of Mount Everest. They were one of the most extended unsolved challenges at the highest level of mountaineering, but have now been successfully climbed. The rocks are located at almost 7,800, 8,100, and 8,200 meters above sea level, which is the height of the base of the pinnacle, and are already in the death zone, in which people cannot usually recover, even when at rest. On Everest, the typical routes avoid this region. The typical northern route passes it on the left. Serious issues and fatalities frequently happen throughout the several attempts to scale the pinnacles and create a new route along the entire northeast ridge. In the first significant attempt to climb in groups at grade 5 within the danger zone, Peter Boardman and Joe Tasker perished in 1982. The climbers Peter Boardman and Joe Tasker were last seen at roughly 27,000 feet late on May 17, 1982, as they prepared to ascend a second rock and ice pinnacle on the mountain's unclimbed east-northeast ridge. They were never seen again once radio communication was lost. 2 days earlier, at around 26,500 feet, the sole woman on an American group marking the first climb on Mount Everest's north base was murdered. Marty Hoy, a mountain guide from Tacoma, Washington, plummeted thousands of feet into a chasm. Her body could not be found. Both crews failed to climb the world's highest peak without using oxygen. Members began returning to Peking on Saturday. The leader appeared to be shaken. Mr. Boardman and Mr. Tasker's absence was not made public until Saturday, when the expedition's commander, Chris Bonington, returned. He was devastated by the setback and only talked to a small number of British journalists. Mr. Bonington stated in his report to the Chinese Mountaineering Association, a copy of which was made public, that while he looked from below via binoculars, his two red-suited comrades vanished at twilight behind the second of two large pinnacles. Mr. Bonington, who was too tired to pursue them, came to the conclusion that Mr. Boardman and Mr. Tasker had fallen down the 10,000-foot Kangshung Cliff, which is covered in extremely steep snow. It seemed unimaginable that they could have remained out of sight for 4 nights and 5 days unless some calamity occurred, particularly at that altitude, where the human body deteriorates extremely fast, especially when they were not utilizing oxygen. Mr. Bonington wrote in his report, 4 major climbers. Mr. Bonington's trip consisted of just 4 main climbers and 2 support climbers, which he admitted was a pretty tiny group for such a large peak. Dick Renshaw, one of the major climbers, had been evacuated due to stroke symptoms produced by high altitude, leaving Mr. Boardman and Mr. Tasker to lead the main attack, with Mr. Bonington, 47, and Adrian Gordon, a support climber, assisting them. All of us expressed while we were doing the climb that it was the most arduous climb any of us had ever undertaken. But it was a worthwhile, exciting challenge, and Pete and Joe were very nearly in sight of complete success. And it's just tragic that this happened to them, said Mr. Bonington, who led a successful ascent of Everest from Nepal in 1975. Mr. Boardman and Mr. Tasker's disappearance is reminiscent of a mystery that happened in 1924, when 2 members of a British expedition, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, vanished. After being sighted fewer than 1,000 feet from the summit, people have speculated about whether they finished the ascent before being slain for over half a century. Mount Everest was not ascended officially until 1953. Mr. Boardman, who was 31 and married at the time, climbed Mount Everest on the British assault of the northwest base from Nepal in 1975, and Kanchenjunga, the world's 3rd highest peak, without oxygen in 1979. He took over as the director of the International School of Mountaineering in Lausanne, Switzerland, and is the author of a contemporary classic. Mr. Tasker, 33 and unmarried, had an exceptional climbing resume. He made the first British winter ascent of the Eiger's North Face in Switzerland and climbed up Kanchenjunga without oxygen. Both climbers were best known for their 2-person ascent of the sheer west wall of India's 22,520-foot Changabang Peak, The Shining Mountain, Mr. Boardman's prize-winning book describing their ascent, has become a contemporary classic in mountaineering literature. Last summer, Mr. Boardman and Mr. Tasker joined Mr. Bonington on the first ascent of Mount Conger in the Chinese Pamirs. They both possessed great mountain judgment, and although bold and resolute in idea, were also prudent and cautious, Mr. Bonington said in his report to the Chinese. Their loss is enormous for the entire climbing world. On their 4 unsuccessful attempts to reach the summit from their advanced camp at about 26,600 feet, the Seattle-based American climbers led by Lou Whitaker encountered strong winds, freezing temperatures, and blizzards. Miss Hoy is said to have died around the second assault on the summit. Larry Nilsson of the American team climbed solo to roughly 27,500 feet on the third attempt before returning due to severe frostbite. He needed to be dragged down the mountain. A fourth attack was called off due to avalanches. An American team from San Francisco gave up after reaching 22,000 feet due to severe weather last October. Next spring, another American team will attempt to ascend Mount Everest through Tibet. American climbers have reached Everest summit from Nepal, but have yet to reach Tibet. Because it has the world's highest unclimbed mountains and some virtually unexplored alpine terrain, China has become the latest mecca for expedition mountaineers. Boardman's death was reported in the media and transmitted to Hilary Boardman in Lausanne and Dorothy Boardman in Manchester on July 11, 1982. A memorial service was conducted at St. George's Church in Stockport. Hilary Boardman, along with Maria Coffey and Joe Tasker's girlfriend, traveled to the north side of Everest as far as Advanced Base Camp in September 1982 to recreate Boardman and Tasker's previous trek. Boardman and Tasker's high point was not reached on expeditions to the Northeast Ridge in 1985, 1986, or 1987. Russell Bryce and Harry Taylor crossed the pinnacles in August 1988, completing the unclimbed segment of the route before descending the North Ridge. Due to the thick monsoon snow cover, they observed no indication of Boardman or Tasker. In 1982, a combined Japanese-Kazakh expedition crossed the pinnacles but was unable to proceed to the top. They discovered a body beyond the second pinnacle on the Rongbuk side of the ridge at roughly 8,200 meters. Photographs taken by Vladimir Suviga and transmitted to Chris Bonington allowed the body to be recognized as Peter Boardman based on his attire and characteristics. The entire ridge was scaled by a Japanese expedition in 1995. They also found a body that was initially believed to be Joe Tasker's. After carefully comparing the written descriptions and photographs provided by each expedition, Chris Bonington came to the conclusion that both sightings were of Boardman. At least it was assumed that this was Joe Tasker, but after carefully considering the written descriptions and pictures provided by each expedition, I became convinced that this was the same as the original sighting, and thus that of Pete. Even now, this section of massive mountain is nearly always avoided due to the several challenges it presents, including the pinnacles itself, the harsh weather, the wind, the height, and the rough terrain. Almost all of Mount Everest's mountaineering difficulties have now been resolved, but 2 routes still present extraordinary challenges. The Direttissima climb on the avalanche-prone east face, the only direct ascent of Everest to date, and the ascent of the North Pillar on the east face over the fabled Fantasy Ridge. This ridge comes to an end just below the 3 pinnacles in the middle of the Northeast Ridge. On the way to the summit, a climber who wanted to ascend the Fantasy Ridge would have to cross the East Ridge and then ascend the 3 pinnacles on the Northeast Hill. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video and found it interesting, then make sure to leave us a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to always be updated with the most exciting content as soon as it's uploaded. Thanks for watching. See you again soon in another video.